Testing one. Good afternoon, everyone. Boleh dengar? Thank you.
saya rasa klaim yang punya.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will be beginning shortly. Can I request the technical team to enable the sign language interpreters to be pinned? Chairperson and Commissioners of the Human Rights Commission of Malaysia, distinguished guests and colleagues, it's our immense pleasure in welcoming you to Suhakam Day 2021. My name is Kumarendran and my pronouns are he, him, his, and I will be assisting everyone here to walk through the virtual event today. We will commence the event at 2 p.m. Kuala Lumpur time, and let's take a moment to glance through the program itinerary. Following the welcoming remarks, there will be two presentations. The first one on the importance of maintaining A status and its impact on NHRIs, followed by on the presentation, moving forward, outcome of Suhakam's 2021 re-accreditation and recommendations for implementation. There will be a panel discussion which is scheduled at 2:45 p.m. We will then view some video presentation before concluding the session with the closing remarks.
Oh, thank you.
Allow me to share some housekeeping notes. Please use your preferred name and organization as your Zoom username. We encourage everyone to use the Suhakam Day virtual background. You may download it from the chat box. I believe my colleagues has placed it in the chat box, the virtual background. The event will be conducted in English with simultaneous interpretation to Bahasa Malaysia and sign language. If you would like to opt to Bahasa Malaysia interpretation, please look for the globe icon at the bottom of the menu bar of the Zoom and select the option Malay. We kindly ask you to mute your microphone as the background noise may disrupt the session and prevent the other participant from hearing the speaker. Apologies in advance. Our technical support team will be going around to mute those unmuted microphones. Kindly be informed that the event is being live streamed via Suhakam official YouTube and Facebook pages. If you choose to turn on your camera and participate in the discussion, we consider that we have your consent. Alternatively, you may also follow the live streaming from our Facebook and YouTube pages. To make a comment or ask a question during the participatory session, you may either type it to the chat box or use the raise hand option, where you'll be invited to take the floor. In the interest of time, we kindly request everyone to keep your interventions short and concise to ensure the space could be more inclusive. Do speak at a reasonable pace, especially not too fast. This is, of course, a reminder to myself as well, as the interpreters need to catch up with all of us. Notes and materials presented during the session will be made available to participants towards the end of the session. Please feel free to drop a line to the co-host or host of the session if you face any technical issues. Thank you for your cooperation, and we'll take a couple of minutes before resuming the session, commencing the session at 2 p.m. It's time for us to formally begin the session. Chairperson and commissioners of Suhakam, distinguished guests and colleagues. We are hosting the event from Suhakam headquarters located in the city of Kuala Lumpur, and right now we have slightly more than 300 guests and associates joining us from Malaysia, the region and beyond. Special mention to representatives from the Southeast Asia NHRI Forum, CNF, and Asia Pacific NHRI Forum, APF. 9 September is observed as Suhakam Day to commemorate the gazettement of the Human Rights Commission of Malaysia Act in the year 1999. This year marks the 22nd anniversary, and we are delighted to host Suhakam's Day observation virtually. This year, the celebration will be more meaningful as Suhakam had, in June 2021, undergone the accreditation process by the Subcommittee of Accreditation, SEA, of the Global Alliance of the National Human Rights Institution country. And we are pleased to announce that Suhakam has been re-accredited with an A status. We are pleased to invite the chairperson of Suhakam, Tan Sri Othman Hashim, to deliver the welcoming remarks.
Thank you very much, Kumarin. Yang berbahagia Datuk Seri Muhammad Syahrul Ikram Yaakob, Secretary General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Malaysia, Mr. Murad Rahib, Chairpersons of the Subcommittee on Accreditations of Gandri, Honorable Speakers, Suhakam Commissioners, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Let me begin by welcoming everyone to this forum to commemorate Suhakam Day. As many of you may know, we celebrate Suhakam Day on 9 September every year to commemorate the day on which the Suhakam, or the Human Rights Commission of Malaysia Act 1999, was gazetted on 9 September 1999. It was a significant day. 22 years have passed and Suhakam has come a long way since it started operation in April 2000. It has faced many challenges, encountered serious setbacks, achieved important milestones, and many lessons learned. Significant advances in human rights over the past 2 decades have opened up space and widened the horizons for conversations on human rights laws, policies, customs, and practices openly and transparently at every level of society. The discussion on what human rights is and what it means to Malaysians is livelier than many years ago. Despite the progress made, there are still huge challenges in the protections and promotions of human rights in Malaysia. From time to time, human rights defenders and individuals are subjected to violations of their rights. Certain segments of the societies are denied their rights. Many cases of human rights abuses were brought to the attention of Suhakam. We in Suhakam will do more to uphold Suhakam's visions of a society in which human rights are fully respected, protected, and enjoyed equally by all. In commemorating this year's Suhakam Day under the theme Realizing Target 16A of the Sustainable Development Goals through the reaccreditation process, it pays homage to the importance of the reaccreditation process, especially in terms of realizing Target 16A of the SDGs towards ensuring an independent national human rights institutions in compliance with the Paris Principles. Briefly, the Paris Principles are a set of international standards adopted by the UN General Assembly in 1993 to promote the independence and effectiveness of national human rights institutions, or NHRIs, in promoting and protecting human rights. In order to preserve both international and domestic recognitions and trust, Suhakam must continue to be credible, legitimate, independent, accountable, and effective. This can be achieved by ensuring the Paris Principles, the principal source of normative standards for NHRIs, guide the work of Suhakam. This year, the celebration is more meaningful as Suhakam had in June undergone the reaccreditation process by the Subcommittee on Accreditation of the Global Alliance of the National Human Rights Institutions. The SCA at once again recommended that Suhakam be reaccredited as an A status NHRI. This status denotes international acceptance of Suhakam and is full compliance with the Paris Principles. For one, Suhakam had demonstrated the capacity to receive, investigate, resolve complaints, promote human rights through its core programs and various other mediums, as well as advising and assisting the government on human rights issues. Suhakam continues to support efforts by the government to reform policies and legislations related to human rights. Additionally, the Paris Principles require NHRIs to be independent in law, policy, operations, and control of resources. It is also necessary to have broad mandate and functions, pluralism in memberships, adequate resources, and good cooperation with civil society, the state, and international bodies. By being reaccredited A status, Suhakam therefore retains the privileges afforded to all A status NHRIs, which encompass significant participation rights and independent access to UN human rights mechanism, including speaking rights in the UN Human Rights Councils and before UN treaty bodies, possibility to play an active role in country decision-making and policy development, access to countries' services, including exchanging good practices, develop knowledge, and access to cooperation on issues of common concern. At the national level, being reaccredited with A status for the third time is a recognition of Suhakam's standings and track record as a national human rights institution. It has been able to carry out its statutory functions and mandate as provided by the Human Rights Commission of Malaysia Act 1999. It validates the attitudes towards Suhakam as a reputable and credible authority on human rights in Malaysia. Over the years, Suhakam has received numerous memoranda from civil society organizations and individuals pertaining to human rights abuses. Suhakam's work is taken seriously and scrutinized by the media and our civil society partners. It is noteworthy that the government of Malaysia, in its voluntary pledges and commitments, for Malaysia's candidature to the United Nations Human Rights Council for the term 2022 to 2024, pledged its commitment to continue supporting and strengthening of Suhakam as an A status Paris Principles NHRI, among others, through improved funding, support, ongoing law review towards strengthening its governing act, and institutionalizing more government agencies' engagement with Suhakam. Suhakam highly appreciates the government's commitment in this regard, and as it will contribute immensely to our work. For the benefit of participants, GWANRI is the main international body of NHRIs in which Suhakam had been a member since 2002. The primary focus of GWANRI, among others, is to promote the strengthening of and interaction among NHRIs and facilitate NHRI's engagement with UN human rights mechanisms, including those of human rights councils. As of 3rd of August 2021, GWANRI's membership total 118, with 86 accredited A status, while 32 B status. Every member of GWANRI undergoes an accreditation process every 5 years on the NHRI's compliance with the Paris Principles. I would like to take this opportunity to stress that the accreditation process is fundamental to all NHRIs. Firstly, being that it provides evidence of NHRI's reliability as a credible and independent actor. Secondly, it assists in enhancing work done through insightful recommendations provided by the SCA, and ultimately helps in ensuring independence, pluralism, effectiveness, and accountability. The recommendations made by the Subcommittee on Accreditations are of great importance to Suhakam. In moving forward, all these recommendations will be given serious considerations, and we are committed to take specific actions in addressing them. Otherwise, there could be negative implications on our credibility and consequently our efforts in realizing target 16A of the SDGs could be jeopardized. With that in mind, I wish to emphasize that the intent of Suhakam Day 2021 extends beyond commemorating the Gazette of the Suhakam Act. In the spirit of constructive engagement, the event today is to provide an avenue to exchange views and share perspectives with our partners and stakeholders on the importance of the re-accreditation process towards ensuring Suhakam's effectiveness and credibility. By sharing the outcome of the report on Suhakam's 2021 re-accreditations, including the SCA's recommendations, we hope to identify ways to implement these recommendations with you in line with Malaysia's commitment to target 16A of the SDG. We in Suhakam look forward to working closely with the government, civil society, human rights defenders, media, and other stakeholders in this undertaking. On behalf of Suhakam, I would like to express our gratitude and appreciations to all participants for taking the time off your busy schedules to join us today. And of course, our special thanks to all those involved who had worked tirelessly in organizing this event. With these remarks, I thank you and wish you all a productive and fruitful discourse. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. We now have the honor to hear from the Chair of the Subcommittee of Accreditation, SCA of the Global Alliance of NHRIs, GWANRI, who is also the Director of the National Human Rights Council of Morocco, Mr. Murad Erahib, who has graciously agreed to speak on the importance of maintaining A status and the impact on NHRIs. However, this will be a pre-recorded video due to the time differences.
Excellencies, Honorable Chairman and members of Suhakam, on behalf of the National Human Rights Council of the Kingdom of Morocco, as the chair of the Subcommittee on Accreditation, let me first thank you for inviting me to speak at this event commemorating the day the Human Rights Commission of Malaysia Act 1999 was gazetted. Celebrating this milestone under the chosen theme, realizing Target 16A of the SDGs through the reaccreditation process, is a sign of continued commitment to protect and promote human rights. Mr. Chairman, honorable members of Suhakam, there could have been no better time to celebrate this milestone than right after having been reaccredited with A status by the Subcommittee on Accreditation back in June this year. And an HRI founding law must conform to the requirements of the Paris Principles and the General Observations. We all remember the instance when Suhakam Act was amended to make it more Paris Principles compliant. Thus, considering that for the past 18 years, Suhakam has been reaccredited A status, means that the Act is worth celebrating, even if there is still space to amend the Act in order to address the latest recommendations formulated by the Subcommittee on Accreditation last June. With the numerous ACA recommendations over the years, Suhakam has grown stronger and is serving as a good example for other institutions in and out of the region. The optimal purpose of the reaccreditation process is not to determine if an institution is A or B. It is rather to help the institution to become fully compliant with the international standards governing the NHRIs. The process identifies strengths and weaknesses and provides opportunity to improve. The work of the ACA is cardinal in achieving indicator 16A.1 of the SDGs, which requires existence of independent NHRIs in compliance with the Paris Principles. As you know, A status NHRIs benefit from a certain number of prerogatives before the United Nations Human Rights Council. They can submit written statements or take the floor under any item. Their submissions for the UPR stakeholders report are reflected under the name of the institution. They can intervene right after their government at the Human Rights Council plenary adopting the UPR report. They can also take the floor right after their government following the presentation of a special procedures mandate holders mission report at the Human Rights Council. The Paris Principles and the General Observations particularly call on NHRIs to monitor and engage with regional and international human rights systems, including UN treaty bodies and human rights councils mechanisms. NHRI's engagement can serve as an effective tool for promoting and protecting human rights. Staff members of A status NHRIs can also benefit from the fellowship program offered by the National Institutions and Regional Mechanisms section at OECHR headquarters. Once more, congratulations on celebrating 22 years of your act, and congratulations for once again being reaccredited A status by the Subcommittee on Accreditation. All the best to Suhakam and to the people of Malaysia. Thank you very much.
We record our deepest appreciation to Mr. Murad for taking the time to deliver this pre-recorded video despite his busy schedule. The next speaker is Datuk Godfrey Gregory Joytol, Suhakam's Commissioner, who will be presenting a presentation on moving forward outcome of Suhakam's 2021 re-accreditation and recommendation for the implementation. We take great pleasure to invite Datuk Godfrey to take the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Kumarayan. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for participating in this online forum. Before I proceed with my presentation, I would like to acknowledge. There's some trouble here. I would like to acknowledge the participation of the Chairman of Suhakam, Tan Sri Osman Hashim, the Secretary General of the Foreign Ministry, honorable members of Parliament, ambassadors, Ms. Karina Ilkori, UN Resident Coordinator in Malaysia, Singapore, and Brunei Darussalam, senior government officers, present and former Suhakam commissioners, and all participants. The topic of my sharing this afternoon is moving forward. Outcome of Suhakam's 2021 re-accreditation and recommendations for implementation. It will cover a brief explanation about the Paris Principles, what is accreditation and why does it matter, the outcome of Suhakam's 2021 re-accreditation and recommendations, and the way forward, our aspirations for the next 5 years. First, let me talk about the Paris Principles. The Paris Principles sets out the main criteria that the NHRIs are required to meet. And the Paris Principles was adopted by the United Nations General Assembly Resolution 48 of 134 on 20th December 1993. They are the international minimum standards for effective and credible national human rights institutions. The UN strongly encourages all states to establish and strengthen an NHRI to comply with the Paris Principles. This encouragement is found in resolutions of the Human Rights Council and the General Assembly, in recommendations of the Universal Periodic Review and treaty monitoring bodies, and in reports of the special procedures. The Paris Principles set out the main criteria that the NHRIs are required to meet. The establishment and the primary law or constitution. Second one, a broad mandate to promote and protect human rights. A formal and functional independence. Pluralism, representing all aspects of society. Adequate resources and financial autonomy. Freedom to address in any human rights issues. Annual reporting on the national human rights situation and cooperation with national and international actors, including civil society organizations. Next is what is accreditation and why does it matter? The Global Alliance of National Human Rights Institutions, or in short, GANRI, through its subcommittee for accreditation, is mandated to accredit national human rights institutions based on the Paris Principles. GANRI's accreditation process is unique in that it is a peer review of NHRIs that is supported and serviced by the UN through the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. For Suhakam's accreditation for this year, 2021, the GANRI Subcommittee on Accreditation was chaired by Mr. Murad Irahib, the NHRI of Morocco, with members from the NHRI of Palestine, Netherlands, and Guatemala. The key considerations of the SCA process have to answer the following questions. are the provisions of the enabling law sufficient to allow the institution to function effectively and independently? Is the NHRI able to carry out its mandate effectively and without interference? And does the NHRI's organization structure, including funding, lend itself to effective and independent functioning? And the last one is, does the NHRI demonstrate independence in practice and willingness to address pressing human rights issues? The reaccreditation process is quite lengthy, and I don't want to look into this in details, but suffice to say that the assessment is rigorous and stringent. And after the SCA has met, the reports and recommendations and of the outcome document of the SCA session will be posted in the SCA website as a public document. The SCA may recommend that an NHRI be accredited or reaccredited with A status, which is described as denoting full compliance with the Paris principles. The SCA may also recommend that an NHRI be accredited or reaccredited with B status, which denotes partial compliance with the Paris principles. And finally, the SCA may recommend that an A status NHRI be downgraded to B status. So Suhakam's accreditation in 2021. Suhakam has been a member of GANRI since 2002. And Suhakam was accredited with an A status since 2002 until 2021. We have undergone 4 reaccreditation. That is 2002, 2011, 2016, and 2021. So what does accreditation means to Suhakam? I think it is a big deal to Suhakam because it ties in with our role as NHRI. If we cannot put our house in order, do we have the credibility? Do we have the trust? And do we have the competence to promote human rights, to advise the government on human rights, to investigate complaints on human rights? So that is a very important question. And the A status is proof that we are a credible organization. We are an organization that can be trusted, and we are an organization that is competent. Of course, with A status, as was mentioned by our chairman and Mr. Morad, it demonstrates that we have full compliance with the Paris principles. We are a world standard organization, international recognized. And apart from that, we are allowed to participate fully in the international and regional work and meetings of national human rights institutions as voting members. And we can hold office in the Bureau of Global Alliance of National Human Rights Institution or any subcommittees of that the Bureau establishes. And we can also participate in sessions of the Human Rights Council and take the floor under any agenda item, submit documentation, and take up separate sitting. Although the subcommittee on accreditation has recommended that Suhakam be re-accredited with A status, there are still rooms for improvement, especially in the following issues. Number one, the selection and appointment. Number two, the appointment of full-time members or commissioners. Number three, adequate funding. Number four, cooperation with human rights bodies. Number five, the annual and special reports. And number six, dismissal. These are the issues that was observed by the SCA that needs to be looked into by Suhakam. Let me touch on the first one, the selection and appointment of commissioners. The subcommittee on accreditations has recommended that Suhakam to ensure the formalization of a clear, transparent, and participatory selection and appointment process of Suhakam commissioners in the Suhakam Act, regulations or binding administrative guidelines as appropriate. A process that promotes merit-based selection and pluralism. So we have looked into this, and we have outlined that the action by Suhakam is number one, to seek the provision of a legal requirement in the Suhakam Act for the Prime Minister to make recommendations to the King based on the list of candidates selected by the Independent Selection Committee. The second one is to seek the formalization of a broad and transparent application and appointment process that includes the requirements to publicize vacancies broadly, maximize potential candidates from a wide range of societal groups and educational qualifications, promote broad consultation or participation in the application, screening, selection, and appointment process. Assess applications on predetermined, objective, and publicly available criteria, and select members based on individual capacity rather than organization they represent. We are looking into this, and for our selection this coming December, we hope to improve on our selection process. The second one is a full-time members or the appointment of full-time commissioners. The subcommittee on accreditation recommended that the Suhakam Act should provide for the appointment of full-time remunerated commissioners apart from part-time commissioners to ensure the independence of Suhakam from actual or perceived conflicts of interest, a stable tenure for members, a regular and appropriate direction for staff, and the ongoing and effective fulfillment of Suhakam functions. And for this, the action by Suhakam is to seek to amend Section 5, bracket 1 of the Suhakam Act 1999 to provide for the appointment of full-time commissioners. The third one is adequate funding. The subcommittee on accreditation recommended that the Malaysian government must provide Suhakam with appropriate level of funding in order to guarantee its independence and its ability to freely determine its priorities and activities. The provision of adequate funding of the state at a minimum includes the following: the allocation of funds for premises that is accessible to the wider community, salaries and benefits awarded to its staff comparable to those of civil servants, performing similar tasks in other independent institutions of the state, remuneration of members of its decision-making body, the establishment of a well-functioning communication system, including telephone and internet, and the allocation of resources for mandated activities. And the action by Suhakam is to apply for yearly government funding in accordance with government budgetary procedures. Of course, we have been applying extra funding, but we appeal to the officers that Suhakam should be provided more than we are getting at this point in time. The fourth one of the subcommittee on accreditation's recommendation is regarding cooperation with human rights bodies. They recommend that Suhakam intensify its engagement and collaboration with relevant actors such as Parliament, government institutions, CSOs, NGOs, media, for effective human rights work. Of course, Suhakam at this point in time have regular and constructive engagement with relevant stakeholders established for the promotion and protection of human rights, including civil society and non-governmental organizations. But we are restricted in the sense that our cooperation also depends on the funding that we have. Because to have a program with civil society organizations and other NGOs, Suhakam will have to contribute to the financing of the programs. And if we don't have much budget, then of course our cooperation with human rights bodies is limited. Number 5, the annual and special reports. The subcommittee on accreditation recommended that to provide in the Suhakam Act that annual reports and special reports to be publicly circulated and tabled, discussed, and considered by the legislature. And this is a new recommendation. It is preferable for Suhakam to have explicit power to table reports directly in the legislature rather than through the executive. The action by Suhakam is that we are going to seek amendments to Section 21 of the Suhakam Act 1999 to make possible the recommendations by the SCA. And we are engaging with relevant agencies and Parliament on this matter. The ECA acknowledges that for the first time in 2018, Suhakam annual report was debated in Parliament and that Suhakam is proposing amendment to the Act to include a requirement for Parliament to debate its reports. The sixth recommendation is dismissal. The recommendation said that Suhakam should include an independent and objective dismissal process. The grounds for dismissal must be clearly defined and appropriately confined to those actions that impact adversely on the capacity of the members to fulfill the institution's mandate. Where appropriate, the legislation should specify that the application of a particular ground must be supported by a decision of an independent body with appropriate jurisdiction. The dismissal must be made in strict conformity with all the substantive and procedural requirements as prescribed by law. Dismissal should not be allowed based solely on the discretion of the appointing authorities. Such requirements promote the security of tenure of members of the governing body and are essential to ensure the independence of and public confidence in the commissioners. So Suhakam will seek amendments to Section 10 of the Suhakam Act 1999 to give effect to this recommendation. The way forward for Suhakam is that we have to take seriously the recommendation by the SCA in order to maintain our independence and to improve the effectiveness of Suhakam as a national human rights institution. It is to be noted that 4 of the 6 SCA recommendations requires the amendments to the Suhakam Act. That is the selection and appointment of full-time members, the appointment and selection of commissioners, the appointment of full-time commissioners, the annual and special reports, and dismissal. And it is also noted that the 4 recommendations above were also recommended in the 2015 re-accreditation. Suhakam has been working on the proposed amendments since a few years back and had obtained valuable inputs and comments from the relevant government agencies. Although we are not yet successful in amending the Suhakam Act following the 2015 re-accreditation recommendations, we are pleased to know that the SCA has taken note of our efforts in seeking amendments to the Act and had given appropriate consideration in Suhakam's 2021 re-accreditation. For the next 5 years, we are looking forward to the assistance of the relevant government agencies in making the amendments to the Suhakam Act a reality. So to sum up, our aspiration for the next 5 years will be: number 1, to seek amendments to the Suhakam Act to implement the SCA's recommendation, to reinforce past partnership with stakeholders. Number 3, to effectively protect and promote human rights in Malaysia. And number 4, to build the organizational capacity of Suhakam and improve human capital. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you.
Thank you, Dato' Godfrey, for the detailed presentation. And moving on, we would like to invite our guests and colleagues to participate in the customary, now it's a tradition, yeah, to take a group photo for the virtual event. Please feel free to turn on your cameras if you're comfortable. This may take several seconds since we have about 336 participants joining us today. Please bear with our photographer, our virtual photographer. Over to you, Suhakam, virtual photographer, Mr. Shazli.
Okay. 1, 2, 3. First page. 1, 2, 3. Second page. 1, 2, 3. Third page. 1, 2, 3. Fourth page. 1, 2, 3. Sixth page. 1, 2, 3. Seventh page. 1, 2, 3. Eighth page. 1, 2, 3. Nine page. 1, 2, 3. 11 page. 1, 2, 3. 12 page. 1, 2, 3. 13 page. Last. 1, 2, 3. 14 page. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shazli, and also our participants and guests for being patient with us. We now will take a 60 seconds break before moving on to the next session. Just right for us to stretch a bit. Suhakam Chairperson and Commissioners, distinguished guests and colleagues, thank you for staying tuned with us. We'll come back and we will proceed with the panel discussion on realizing Target 16A of the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, through the re-accreditation process. The session will be moderated by Suhakam Commissioner, Mr. Gerald Joseph. Mr. Gerald will be joined by learned representative, and the session will last for 75 minutes, which will also include participatory sessions for participants to ask questions and make their interventions. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Gerald Joseph to take the floor. Over to you, Mr. Gerald.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Kamarin. Good afternoon. All protocols observed. I learned this in Kenya, so you just say that and you show respect to all big dignitaries. We're very happy to have colleagues from Wisma Putra, commissioners here. I think happy Suhakam Day. It's commemorating 22 years since the Enabling Act was passed in Parliament. And since the setup of the organization, it's 21 years plus now. So they say 21 years normally it's adulthood and we have freedom, but freedom is what we fight for Malaysia. So on behalf of the 9 commissioners here, I think if the commissioners are, your cameras are on, you can put a wave so people can recognize who are the commissioners. I know there's different frames some of you all are seeing. So we have 1 chairperson and 8 commissioners. 7 are called what I would call general commissioners, and 1 is a dedicated specialized commissioner called the Children's Commissioner, Professor Azia. And we have 1 commissioner who is from the overseeing the regional office in Sabah, Datuk Godfrey, and Datuk Madeline is overseeing the regional office of Sarawak. And the other commissioners here with me, Datuk Ma Wing Kwai, Datuk Lok Yin Peng, Dr. Nick Salida, I think, and Datuk Sri Hishamuddin. So that's our full team of commissioners. To celebrate today's event, it's a whole team of 92 staff and 9 commissioners. So I want to give a huge respect and call out to our staff members. So staff members, if you are there, can you wave so the public will know who you are? Led by Dr. Chia and 3 Deputy Secretaries, Puan Rafida, Mr. Simon, and Jennifer. Thank you to all staff members for keeping Suhakam going, for keeping up our work, the demands, as well as the pressure to bring human rights to Malaysia. We are celebrating this re-accreditation. But what does re-accreditation mean? I think, thank you, Dr. Godfrey, he spelled it out very well. But I think this session is helping us move to the word realizing target 16A of SDG, Sustainable Development Goal. Most of us are not experts on SDGs. There are some who may know, but what is 16A? The Sustainable Development Targets was set up by the UN. All governments of the world supported it, said that we wanted a better world in 2030. And one of these targets, just one, 16A, is to strengthen relevant national institutions, and that includes Suhakam, through international cooperation, building better capacities at all levels, for preventing violence and combating crime and terrorism. So the whole idea is, if we have a national institution, it must be strengthened much better. And this is the work of a re-accreditation process. So today with us on the panel, we have a good mix of excellent speakers who will help us through, and I will invite and warmly welcome the speakers by a brief introduction about them, and then I will call them out to give their 10-minute presentation. And then colleagues who have joined us online, thank you for joining us. You are free to also put your comments or your questions on the chat box, or you can raise your hand. It will be just a 1-minute intervention, and we hope to have a few of those questions for the panelists. So to the first panel member with us is no other than Datuk Sri Sharul Ikram Yaakob, who is the Secretary General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Very experienced. He's had duties as the permanent rep in New York. He's worked in China, Austria, and many others. So he's been in the ministry since '88. So you know that speaks of his experience. Welcome, Datuk Sri Sharul Ikram, and for joining us. Our second speaker will be Mr. Philip Waddell, who's a legal and policy manager at the Asia Pacific Forum on National Human Rights Institution. This organization may not be familiar with many of you. In short, we call it APF. It is a membership organization of human rights commissions like Suhakam in Asia Pacific. So every human rights commission is a member of APF, and they are a strong partner. They are supportive. They help us in building capacity. They help us to prepare for reports. And so APF, the secretary, is in Australia. And welcome, Mr. Philip Waddell, for joining us today to say a few words. Our third speaker, also a very regular partner with Suhakam, is Dr. Punita Silvaraju, who is the Director for Policy and Research at the Legal Affairs Division of the Prime Minister's Department. Some will know it in its short form called BHEUU, B-H-E-U-U. So the minister in charge now is Datuk Sri Wan Junaidi. Welcome the new minister. And this BHEUU, or Legal Affairs Division, has the mandate for the coordination, overall coordination of domestic human rights issues. So Dr. Punita is our partner on the other side to help us through on domestic human rights issue. She also has experience for many years in the government. She was with the Ministry of Energy and Green Technology and Water prior to this. And our final speaker for today will be Ms. Shomira Sanyal, who's from the National Human Rights Institution Program Associate at Forum Asia. Forum Asia is a regional human rights NGO that has it's based in Bangkok, and it has many areas of human rights focus, but one of it is on human rights institution. She helps coordinate the Asian NGO network of NHRIs. In short, it's called ANI, that has 30 organizations as a member. One of its work may be painful for human rights commissions like Suhakam and many others is they come up with an annual report, and it's quite critical, but it's good for us to listen to this good and the bad in order to improve ourselves. So welcome, Ms. Shomira. So with that round of introduction with 4 excellent speakers and a good mix, it is now my pleasure to call on our first speaker for the day, Datuk Sri Muhammad Sharul Ikram Yaakob, the Secretary General of Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Over to you, Datuk Sri, for your 10 minutes intervention.
Thank you, Gerard, for your kind introduction. Assalamualaikum and good afternoon to all members of the panel and the audience who are joining us today. I really appreciate the invitation from Suhakam to participate into this panel to commemorate Suhakam Day. First of all, happy 22nd anniversary to Suhakam. Suhakam has indeed come a long way since its establishment in 1999, when it was operating from a container cabin at Wisma Putra to where it is now. On the part of Wisma Putra, I would like to take this opportunity to reiterate the Ministry's commitment in supporting Suhakam and to continue to work closely with Suhakam in promoting and protecting human rights in Malaysia. Our ongoing collaborations efforts include the UPR process. Here, Wisma Putra plays the role of the national mechanism for reporting and follow up on UPR recommendations. We basically facilitate the coordination, monitoring, and implementation of the recommendations between our line agencies, the UN, Suhakam, and civil societies. We reiterate our commitment to holding the UPR consultation at least twice a year. And in the most recent session chaired by Wisma Putra was just held last month, attended by over 80 participants from our line agencies, UN agencies, Suhakam, the Bar Council, and civil society organizations. Suhakam also provided constructive input for our first ever midterm review of our UPR, which we just submitted yesterday. As you are aware, Malaysia is running for membership in the UN Human Rights Council for the term 2022-2024. The elections will be held just next month. I really appreciate Suhakam's strong support for our HRC membership, including in providing valuable recommendations for our voluntary pledges and commitments to the Council. We have also successfully organized two events with Suhakam so far this year as part of the promotion of our HRC candidature. They consisted of a webinar on women empowerment in March 2021 and a webinar on youth empowerment in August 2021. At the end of the year, the Ministry would normally co-organize a Human Rights Day celebration with Suhakam and the UN office in Malaysia. We plan to maintain this collaboration and tradition in the coming years. It would be remiss on my part not to mention that 3 former top Malaysian diplomats have helmed Suhakam as chairman. They include the former KSU of Wisma Putra, the current chairman, Tan Sri Osman Hashim, and two former Malaysian representatives to the UN, Tan Sri Razali Ismail and Tan Sri Hasmi Agam. I believe this contributes towards fostering greater understanding and appreciation within the two sides, bringing them together and strengthening relations between Suhakam and the government. I would also like to take this opportunity to congratulate Suhakam for its A status re-accreditation, as recommended by the Subcommittee on Accreditation of the Global Alliance of the National Human Rights Institution, GANRI, recently. This means that Suhakam is regarded as in full compliance with the Paris Principles that set out the international minimum standards for national human rights institutions. We also acknowledge the general observation conveyed by the SCA in its recommendation to Suhakam towards making Suhakam more effective and independent. Wisma Putra strongly supports efforts to make Suhakam more effective and independent in promoting and protecting human rights in the country in line with Target 16A of the SDG. And by independent, I mean independent from all parties to ensure its credibility, not just independent from the government, as people would normally expect, but also from foreign countries, lobbying groups, or other NGOs. In further strengthening Suhakam's functions, I believe there are several ways that Wisma Putra can play its role and extend its support, including, first, in the latest development, the newly appointed Malaysian Foreign Minister, Datuk Saifuddin Abdullah, has reinstituted a Foreign Policy Consultative Council consisting of foreign ministry officials, academicians, businessmen, Suhakam, which is represented by Mr. Gerald Joseph himself, and civil society organization. This reflects the ministry's commitment to have an open and consultative engagement with the relevant stakeholders, including Suhakam, when addressing foreign policy issues. Second, in facilitating between Suhakam and other ministries and agencies, I acknowledge there is a need to increase coordination and to hold dialogues in a more institutionalized manner between Suhakam and other ministries or agencies. Wisma Putra stands ready to play the role of a facilitator if required, not just within the context of the UPR, but beyond. Third, we could perhaps learn from the experience of some countries, including our neighbor Indonesia, which established a human rights unit in each ministry to ensure that human rights considerations are taken into account in all their policies and actions. For instance, on gender equality or rights of persons with disabilities, the Human Rights Unit could serve as a focal point in liaising with Suhakam. That way, although government and priorities might change, institutionalized cooperation with Suhakam will remain at the working level. Fourth, we should organize more events, workshops, seminars with Suhakam to increase awareness, exchange views, and explore options relating to human rights issues in the country. Wisma Putra and other ministries have taken part in several workshops and events organized or participated by Suhakam this year, which we find very insightful, including on social, economic, and cultural rights, as well as on business and human rights. These events are particularly important for government officers to enhance their understanding and sensitivities, as well as build their capacity in addressing human rights issues under their respective purviews. Fifth, Wisma Putra will continue to recommend or remind at any opportunity other ministries, agencies to consult Suhakam when considering policies, programs, or projects with implications on human rights. Sometimes in our hectic work schedule and internal deliberations process, we may overlook the need to consult Suhakam. But it is necessary in order to enable Suhakam to effectively carry out its advisory role to the government as laid out in the Suhakam Act. Sixth, in the past 2 years, Wisma Putra has been engaging at the ministerial level with civil society organizations and Suhakam on the sidelines of the Human Rights Council sessions in Geneva. We plan to continue such fruitful engagements. Last but not least, if Malaysia is given the honor to serve as a Human Rights Council member, and we should know by next month, Wisma Putra plans to engage closely with Suhakam on specific issues deliberated at the Council. We could tap on Suhakam's expertise, knowledge and skill to assist throughout our membership in the Council. Well, above are the ways that, from our perspective, that we could consider to further strengthen our collaboration with and support for Suhakam in the years to come, reflecting Malaysia's commitment to achieving target 16A of the Sustainable Development Goal. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Datuk Sri Muhammad Sharul, for... Am I unmuted?
You're right.
Okay. Thank you, Datuk Sharul. That was very good, capturing our partnership. I like how you started from the cabin to where we are. I think for those who don't know the history, it is true. It was the container cabin as a quick response for some. I think there's still a few officers here in Suhakam who worked in the cabin before. So I think Tan Sri Othman was also that time with Wisma Putra for that. But I think we've come a long way. Malaysia has come a long way in terms of human rights. I think the examples you've given, even I can personally say the engagement. Malaysian government is one of the few governments who actually does a dialogue in Geneva with international NGOs. It's not easy, you know, there'll be very tough questions, but in the order to sit and to have that, it shows commitment that we are open. We don't have all the answers, we are not perfect in Malaysia, but we are willing to move forward. And we take your point on Wisma Putra joining to support us in facilitating institutional engagement. I think that's a brilliant idea, we need that. And also move to work on a human rights unit in each ministry. I think that has been work in some years. I think that's a good way forward. Thank you so much, Datuk Sharul. That will definitely help Suhakam in SDG 16A, but also Suhakam is ever ready to partner with the Wisma and other agencies when the government gets its appointment or selection into the Human Rights Council. We all look forward to that added responsibility to Malaysia to stand up to human rights. Thank you so much. With that, we now move to our next speaker, Mr. Philip Wardle, the Legal and Policy Manager from Asia Pacific Forum on National Human Rights Institutions, known as APF. Over to you.
Greetings and thanks very much, Commissioner Gerald Joseph, for that welcome, and a warm thanks also to the Chair, Commissioners, and of course the staff of Suhakam for the invitation to join this important event. And may I also extend my thanks and greetings to representatives from the Government of Malaysia, members of Parliament, who I understand are also joining, civil society, and also representatives from the international community who are here today. And importantly, congratulations to Suhakam, both in celebration of the anniversary of your establishment as a national human rights institution, but also for your recent accreditation with GANRI as fully compliant with the Paris Principles. This is a fantastic achievement, and it illustrates the commitment of your institution to promoting and protecting human rights in Malaysia. Suhakam has been a valued member of the APF since 2002 and plays an important role as a member of the APF's decision-making bodies, both our Forum Council and Governance Committee. Now, I do have a presentation, some slides. If you just bear with me, I will try and open those up now for colleagues to review. So I hope...
questions from YouTube and all that.
So I hope everyone can see the screen and slides fine from your side. And I wanted to start today with a brief overview of the history of the APF and what we do, as I know there are many of us joining today who perhaps aren't so familiar with our work in the Asia Pacific region. So the APF was established in 1996 as a small network of 4 national human rights institutions. But today we've grown to a much larger 25-member peak body that represents a diverse range of institutions across a vast geographical area, from West Asia, Palestine in the West, all the way to Samoa in the Pacific. So we have a broad geographical remit and quite a diverse membership in many respects. Some key functions of the APF. Our principally providing support to our member institutions with capacity development, trainings, and professional networking opportunities. And I know in this respect, Suhakam is a very engaged member in our in that particular aspect of our work. We also represent our members occasionally in global and regional forums, and increasingly have a role, an advocacy role, both in terms of regional policy development on behalf of our members, but also supporting our members who are facing reprisals from government and non-state actors. Unfortunately, we're seeing an increase in this work in recent years in many contexts across the region, most recently as in Afghanistan, as I'm sure you've been aware over the past month. And we also, and key to this presentation, the APF also provides advice and support to our members with the GANRI accreditation process. And that's a key part of my role at the APF in the work with GANRI's subcommittee on accreditation. And finally, we also provide advice and guidance directly to states who are interested in establishing a national human rights institution. This is largely triggered by the UPR process at the Human Rights Council, and we've been quite closely involved with the establishment of many institutions in the region over the past 25 years. We've heard a lot today about GANRI accreditation and the importance of GANRI accreditation, but I just wanted to reinforce some of those points, in particular, focus on the importance that we draw on of the accreditation system at the APF. As we've heard from many other speakers today, GANRI accreditation confers important privileges for NHRIs. Not least, it permits them to participate independently in their own name and take the floor at the UN Human Rights Council and some other UN treaty bodies. Additionally, and this is very important for us, but the APF also uses GANRI accreditation as a prerequisite for its own membership. So only A-status accredited institutions are permitted to vote in the APF's General Assembly of Members, and they're also the ones who A-status members can nominate a representative on the APF's decision-making bodies, the Forum Council and our Governance Committee. But aside from these formal privileges, I think more fundamentally, GANRI accreditation, as we've heard, is a peer review system. That is, voting members on GANRI's subcommittee are elected from NHRIs themselves. And although the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, OHCHR, does support and provides quite valuable support to the subcommittee, decision makers on the subcommittee are NHRIs and not states. And it's for this reason that accreditation as being compliant with the Paris Principles sends a strong message of legitimacy to the community of NHRIs that the accredited institution is independent, credible, and effective. And that's, I think, a key and almost a unique aspect of the global accreditation process, and certainly one of its strengths. However, despite that peer review character of the accreditation system, as we've heard from earlier speakers, the accreditation process also considers state performance. That's because the Paris Principles framework looks not only at the performance of the NHRI, but also its legal mandate in the constitution or legislation, which of course is a matter for the Parliament and the executive government. So it's that balance that's quite important, and I think also speaks to a sense of responsibility of states in safeguarding the Paris Principles. And as also we've heard from earlier speakers, that also goes to the responsibility of states under the Sustainable Development Goals framework. In particular, SDG 16, which, as we've heard, requires states to have established a functional and Paris Principles compliant NHRI. I didn't want to take too much time up today, and I'm hoping to leave more space for other presenters and some questions. But before I finish, I wanted to just speak briefly on Suhakam's engagement in the accreditation process from the perspective of the APF. And We've been quite closely involved with colleagues from Suhakam over the past 2 years in their engagement with GANRI and the development of their accreditation application. And this started back in January 2020 in Doha, Qatar, back when we were all able to hold real life meetings in person, where the chair and a team of staff from Suhakam attended the APF's inaugural conference on GANRI accreditation over a 3-day period to engage with other institutions from across the region on some issues that they're facing and to learn and share experiences on the GANRI accreditation process. Since that conference, Suhakam took what we would describe as a really courageous and quite an innovative approach to engaging with the accreditation process. And one of the points I really wanted to highlight today is the constructive engagement by Suhakam with its civil society partners in the lead up to the accreditation review. As part of the process, Suhakam convened a dialogue with civil society organisations, effectively encouraging them to submit shadow reports and opening itself up to criticism in front of the SCA from those civil society partners. And this really demonstrates the commitment from Suhakam to transparently engage with its, with civil society partners. And as we've heard from Commissioner Gerald Joseph, sometimes that criticism can be quite pointed. And I think that engagement was certainly acknowledged by the SCA as a really constructive aspect of Suhakam's civil society partnerships and was recognised in the SCA's report. I won't speak in detail in my presentation on each of the recommendations, as we've heard quite a bit earlier on from other speakers on those points, but I did want to reinforce that the identified issues of concern in the SCA's report related largely to aspects of Suhakam's legal mandate, not the performance of its mandate. And this is important because I think it means that the institution itself is performing exceptionally well by regional and global standards, and will be able to continue in that performance with only some slight technical changes to its legal mandate, as we've heard from earlier on. In terms of the next steps, and I'm also keen to have a discussion with other panelists and participants today, the process from here, as we've heard, is that Suhakam will retain its A status for the next 5 years. The Subcommittee on Accreditation for A status institutions has a mandatory periodic cycle. So Suhakam will have to go back in 5 years' time and resubmit an application, confirming its continued compliance with the Paris Principles. And as part of this process, there is an expectation by the subcommittee that within that 5-year period, the issues of concern will have been addressed. So, as I said, this requires some advocacy and some engagement on a few discrete changes to the legal mandate of the institution, and participation from a broad range of stakeholders, not just from Suhakam itself, but also from with contributions from government, parliamentarians, and civil society. I'll leave it there, and again, thank you all, colleagues, for the opportunity to join and to speak with you today, and congratulations again to commissioners and to staff from Suhakam on celebrating your anniversary. It's a real privilege to join you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Philip Waddell, for those kind words of encouragement, but you've been a good partner with us for years in helping us prepare for this report and also to move forward. But I think one of the lessons of any accreditation process is that we've got to get through the recommendation by the subcommittee for substantive changes as read out by Dato' Godfrey earlier. And I think two speakers already mentioned, or 2 or 3 speakers mentioned, about the privileges of having an A status. I think the biggest privilege is the privilege of a country to be able to say that its institution is independent and compliant with Paris Principles. So I think it's to the credit of all of Malaysia that we must fight to ensure that we maintain this A. If not, it becomes a meaningless institution that does not stand out on the reasons and rationale of why it was set up. So thank you again, Philip, for those continued partnership. We will be coming back to you for more questions on this way forward. But the APF is our formalized body, but we are also a member of the global body called GANRI, if those are not familiar, the Global Alliance of NHRIs. And we're also part of a smaller network called the CNF, Southeast Asia NHRI Forum, where we have 11 members. And I think one of the roles of APF is to help governments set up a Human Rights Commission. I think Malaysia, being a member of ASEAN, an active member of ASEAN, we don't have a very good record here. There are still 5 countries that don't have Human Rights Commission, so we should work together to get all countries to have a Human Rights Commission in the future. Thank you so much, Mr. Philip. And now with that, we continue with our next presentation by Dr. Punita Silvaraju, the Director for Policy Research, Legal Affairs Division, BAYU from the Prime Minister's Office. Over to you, Dr. Punita.
Thank you, Mr. Gerard. Allow me to first congratulate Suhakam for your 22 years of establishment and your recent accreditation. Also allow me to just say that BAYU is very happy to work with Suhakam on various projects, and we value our good relationship in all the projects that we work together. Allow me to just very quickly, I have a slide here, and very quickly just explain how we could assist in realizing the target 16A of strengthening relevant national institutions. Firstly, there are certain areas in which BAYU works very closely with Suhakam, and I've actually highlighted them here in 5 bullets. Firstly is the appointment of commissioners. Appointment of commissioners that we do every 3 years. We appoint new commissioners, and the upcoming one is for the period of 2022 to 2025. So we've already started a lot of work. We've also discussed with Suhakam. Suhakam has actually sent us some of their recommendations on how to improve the current situation in terms of appointment of commissioners, and we definitely welcome that. Of course, the process is a long process, and I think the current commissioners, a few of them would their tenure would end sometime in April 2022. So we hope to get everything done so that the new commissioners could come on board right at the right time, and we will not have any delay. Of course, this includes the advertising procedures and of applications, shortlisting, where we have a proper, transparent manner in how we actually do shortlisting. We have a selection committee, and also finally we've got criteria for both the appointment of commissioners as well as the selection committee members. And of course, finally, it is the appointment is done by the Yang Ketua Agong. So this is the first thing, and this is currently something that is in the pipeline. Next would be the National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights. I think this is also something that we are working very closely with Suhakam, and something that Suhakam actually started way back in 2016. Actually, they did the groundwork for us. And I thank them for that, because with that it makes this whole process much easier for us. So a lot of engagement has been done with Suhakam and also UNEP in this development process. This is something that is currently in the process, so we are working towards it. So a lot of preliminary discussions, a lot of capacity building, a lot of workshops, seminars, just trying to introduce the concept of business and human rights to the masses. And I think Suhakam has contributed a great deal to this. They are also in our steering committee. We had a steering committee meeting with the previous Minister of Law, and Suhakam also is in our technical committee, so they would definitely their ideas and views would be taken into consideration in both of these high-level committees. Next would be the National Human Rights Action Plan. This is something that I must say, I think Suhakam has got a very strong opinion on this. And I must also mention that we are looking into reviewing the NHRAP, which was launched in 2018. Of course, it's about time. So definitely this review would involve Suhakam, just as how we are working very closely for the National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights. We'll also work very closely in respect of reviewing the NHRAP. And we hope Suhakam would be able to assist us in this. We will definitely require your experience and your this area. Next would be, I think, the amendment of the Suhakam Act. I think this was mentioned earlier by the Commissioner as well as being something that is very important for Suhakam. And I think we've had Bayu being the, not Bayu, I would say the Minister of Law, being the minister entrusted with human rights, domestic human rights issues. I think it's important for us to assist Suhakam, and we have been doing that. We've had I think a session with ministries, engagement session with other agencies to look at some of the proposed amendments. Suhakam has actually submitted those proposed amendments to us, and we've looked at them, and we've had several discussions with the relevant agencies to get their input on whether those amendments are something that we can go on with. And there are just a few more areas that we need to look at, and I think we'll be working on that with Suhakam and also with other agencies like JPA and MOF. So areas that we're looking at when it comes to amendments, the areas of function of Suhakam itself, remuneration of commissioners, funding for commissioners and for the commission itself. I think one of the commissioners earlier mentioned funding is an impediment, so that is something that we should look at. And of course, the annual report. I must say that the annual report has always been late in Parliament, and in 2019, it was for the very first time debated. And this is something that we hope to see often. And next would be other matters. In terms of human rights matters, we also work closely with Suhakam and KLN, particularly domestic human rights issues, although it is dealing with ministries, but Bayu is more of in terms of domestic human rights. We also work very closely with Suhakam in terms of law reform. Bayu has several laws in the pipeline, particularly the freedom of information and right to information law, whistleblower protection law, amendments to the Penal Code, investment and stocking. And Suhakam has been in a committee whose Suhakam's views have been always taken into consideration, and we hope to continue this in terms of law reform. Other things pertaining to administration and financial matters, as I mentioned earlier, we facilitate Suhakam, other ministries, other agencies, central agencies particularly. So, in the event there are any discussion with JPA, for example, or with the Ministry of Finance, Bayu would always facilitate those discussions. And we are also the person that will actually take papers to Cabinet back to human rights matters, and also the budget, Suhakam's budget. I think Suhakam has been better, and I think Bayu is also assisting. So I think these are some of the areas that are working very closely with Suhakam, and I hope that we would foster, this close relationship, and also we could together to ensure that this target 16A is met, and really, again, once again, Suhakam.
Thank you, Dr. Punita, for outlining the ongoing work. I think this work has been in a few years in the files, and we continue to work together I think I'm really happy to hear the quick action by Bayu on already preparing for the appointment, the criterias for the incoming set of commissioners. I think the more credible is based on transparency, and the process won't be questioned. So whoever is chosen will get the due respect. And Bayu is our, what shall we say, our conduit into government as an independent body, but we still have an interlocutor, and Bayu, the Minister of Law, is our friend, our partner into the government. So I think that's why Dr. Punita said even cabinet papers, even for the annual report on Suhakam to Parliament is actually our partner is Bayu, who helps us through the minister get it into Parliament. So thank you again, Dr. Punita, and your team, and we look forward to many more meetings and a lot more engagement, because the re-accreditation process means we got a lot of work as a Paris Principal independent institution, but for more so for the government in its SDG reporting 16A, the substance will be, this is one of the independent commissions that must be reported on the progress. So I think the other line agency who's working on SDGs will also benefit from this discussion today. Thank you very much, Dr. Punita. And we come to our final speaker for this panel before we have an open discussion. So colleagues, if you're preparing to ask a comment or make a comment or ask a question, you can use the chat box, or you can raise your hands and we can invite you. But those on Zoom, you can use chat box. Those on YouTube and Facebook, you can make comments, and we will try to collect some, and within the permitted time, request the panel speakers to give some feedback on your comments. Your comments will be acknowledged. We will take it up as part of your feedback. That's fine. But if you want a specific question, you could also put that out and we will pick it up. So our final speaker, as mentioned by Mr. Philip earlier, one of the hallmarks of Suhakam is the ability to engage openly with civil society partners, and that's an important stakeholder in Malaysia. And so today we have with us Ms. Shomira Sanyal, the NHRI Program Associate from Forum Asia, a regional NGO based in Bangkok. Over to you for the next presentation, Ms. Shomira.
Thank you, Commissioner Joseph. A very good afternoon to everyone present here, and for having us join this wonderful event today. Many congratulations to Suhakam for your recent re-accreditation with an A status. And just for a bit of context, for the past little more than over a decade, Suhakam started its work on improving its status, and today, 3 sessions later, it is re-accredited with an A status. So this is a cause for celebration, and this is certainly very encouraging, as it indicates that the Commission has worked on a lot of the recommendations that came in over the years, whether it was from civil society or Gandri SCA, and that it has played an active role in the promotion and protection of human rights in Malaysia. Just for more context on ANI, ANI is the Asian NGO Network on National Human Rights Institutions. We are a network of 30 organizations, civil society organizations across Asia. And Forum Asia, as the secretariat of the ANI network, has consistently been raising issues, as Commissioner Joseph also mentioned earlier, both critical and supportive over the past decade, and also pointing out areas of improvement. We've worked closely with civil society in Malaysia to conduct advocacy and to work towards a better functioning of Suhakam as the NHRI. One example here would be the ANI report, which is an annual report that has consistently highlighted the areas of progress and those that need improvement, as well as providing Suhakam and the government of Malaysia with recommendations depending on the year and the context. Alongside this, ANI has been working with civil society to submit stakeholder submissions to the Gandri SCA. So the stakeholder submissions are reports on the performance of the NHRI. This happens a few months before the re-accreditation actually takes place. So this is a space for us to also highlight the good work or the areas of improvement that an NHRI requires. And we have been working on this for the past several years. A few years ago, ANI also had its regional consultation in Malaysia, where members of the ANI network had also the chance to meet with Suhakam and discuss a range of different issues. Our joint engagement with Suhakam, and this is also particularly, I can give examples from the recent months. So the SCA re-accreditation happened in June, but as recently as August, we've had a lot of interaction with Suhakam on different events. We have met and collaborated on a number of initiatives in the recent past. For an example, we had a collaboration on an event on the NHRI's event on human rights during the pandemic, which was a good space for us to come together, civil society, NHRIs, Suhakam as moderator, to speak about different issues in the region, especially in the context of COVID-19, and to highlight the human rights challenges. Alongside this, as Commissioner Joseph already mentioned, we do engage with CNF as well, which is working at a sub-regional level. So ANI had an interface meeting with CNF very, very recently, where Suhakam was the chair as well. And today we are here to attend this wonderful event. So this is a background on some of our engagements with Suhakam. If I could quickly move into the SCA report of this year, as well as the suggestions of the Gundry SCA, I think it's been amply covered by other panelists as well. But just to touch very briefly on some of the issues, such as the selection and appointment process, having full-time members, adequate funding, and guarantee of tenure. And these are some concerns that the Gundry SCA has, of course, put forward in its report, but this is also something that civil society has been requesting for a very long time. We've been highlighting it in our reports to flag it that these are issues that perhaps Suhakam and the government of Malaysia could potentially work on to improve its functioning and efficacy in working in human rights in Malaysia. Moving on very briefly, I see that the SCA has commended Suhakam for its collaborations with CSOs and asked it to continue this. This is something that my fellow panelist Philip also mentioned. This has been very, very progressive from a civil society perspective. And as civil society members, we can certainly say that this has really helped in opening up avenues for us to talk on the different issues, to hear different perspectives, even if we may have differing viewpoints on certain issues. When it comes to Suhakam's work and functioning, we've seen very positive examples in recent times. For example, Suhakam's collaboration with civil society on research and advocacy initiatives. For example, Act for Cat, which was on the Convention Against Torture. There's been a cartoonist competition recently. Suhakam has also started public inquiries, such as one a few years ago on enforced disappearances. Suhakam has also raised the issue of transgender community and the LGBTQI rights of undocumented migrants and refugees, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, and vulnerable populations during the pandemic as well. This is something that we have highlighted in a briefer that we released on NHRI's responses to COVID-19. So this is a good practice that we would certainly like to commend Suhakam for. And finally, Suhakam's work on suggesting amendments to the enabling law, which has been mentioned previously. And this is really a positive step in the direction of reform, considering that this has been raised by the Gundry SCA as well. With regard to Suhakam's strategic plan for 2021 and 2025, we see that Suhakam has certainly raised very, very important issues on economic and social rights, especially of vulnerable groups in Malaysia. Measures to tackle racism, racial discrimination, and xenophobia, human rights education and children's rights, and also just working a lot on media engagement to use alternative channels of information technology, strengthening networks and partnerships. So very positive measures. Something that we could certainly add over here in this respect is that while Suhakam is certainly focusing on economic and social rights, we would certainly encourage Suhakam to continue its work on civil and political rights as well, and especially focus on HRD protection in the coming years. when I would like to come finally to our final thoughts and recommendations, if there is time for that. Very briefly, we have to remember that NHRIs are human rights defenders themselves. It's important to have an institution and an institutional voice that can advocate for the protection and promotion of the rights for all, irrespective of gender, class, caste, race, everything. So this is something that we should certainly remember, that NHRIs do have a very difficult position on a lot of issues, but they are a body that can advocate very effectively for the rights of people. There is scope for Suhakam to work with Parliament and parliamentarians, especially this will be very useful in bringing human rights advocacy and education closer to the ground and open up new avenues for Suhakam to reach out to grassroots communities and to provide feedback on human rights violations to policymakers. As has been mentioned by previous speakers, just an encouragement to Suhakam to keep working and strengthening the implementation of National Human Rights Action Plan of 2018, to keep advising the government on legislations, and to keep advocating for proposed amendments to the enabling law, as well as the debate on the annual report in the Parliament. This is very, very important so that all issues of human rights violations can be raised at the legislature. This is something that you've already done, but we would also request that when you are doing this work, to also address repressive laws so that they're not used to target human rights defenders. Suhakam has played a very strong role as a facilitator of interaction and engagement between civil society and government stakeholders. We would encourage Suhakam to continue facilitating and encourage this discourse between different stakeholders. If our example is something that you can look at, we have worked, as I mentioned previously, very closely with Suhakam on different initiatives, and Suhakam plays a very crucial role in this respect. So this is something that we could certainly say that you could continue. When it comes to the pluralism and diversity within the Commission, a few recommendations from our end, if Suhakam would take them up, is perhaps to have more youth representation within the Commission. We understand that there is an age limit, there are these concerns, but certainly it would help to have a youth representation to highlight issues which speak to them, as well as a gender balanced representation within the Commission as well. And perhaps to institute an HRD focal point in Suhakam. And lastly, just to continue engaging various networks and CSOs such as ourselves. And we're looking forward to working with you in the coming years. Congratulations once again, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Shomira, for your thoughts, and for Ani being a partner for Suhakam and all other NHRIs. Yes, you've been constructive, you've been supportive, you've been critical, and we appreciate those thoughts. I think the points made about a reminder of an NHRI is a human rights defender, I think is an important point, because we will have to, and I think Suhakam today, in our 21st plus anniversary, also knows the pain of the public who react strongly to our positions. Online, you can go to our Facebook, we have not deleted, you can see what they say about us, not because we have taken sides with any group, but we have no choice but to take sides with all. So I think the point of human rights is all human rights for all, and that's, I think, all Human Rights Commission will always have a very tough mandate. How do you manage different kinds of community who are human beings, who are embodied with rights from the day of birth, and coming to a commission to seek protection, legal protection, policy protection, and as a human rights body, we cannot say, sorry, we're not taking this up. That's just a failure of our mandate legally. So thank you for the reminder. That's a strong reminder, but also for recognizing our strategic plan. For colleagues online, you can go to the Suhakam website. We have our 5-year strategic plan, 2021-2025. Please look at it, engage with us on different areas of focus. It has our two main focus is on economic, social, cultural rights, and on working towards eradicating racial discrimination in Malaysia. Thank you so much, Ms. Shomira, for your thoughts. With that, we now go into the discussion part with colleagues online, participants, the public. If you have comments and if you have any thoughts or questions directed directly to our panel members, please, I will read it out. If you have, or you can also raise the hand. We have a few minutes here because we want to benefit from the participation of a good panel of people, a good mix from civil society, from NHRI association, and from government, two excellent speakers from government. So if you want to raise your hand, you can, or if you want to write your thoughts in the chat box, or if you're on YouTube or Facebook, please write your comments there. Our colleagues are also picking some of those thoughts up. As we are waiting for it, I also want to acknowledge that there are members of parliament here with us. Welcome and thank you for joining us. You are our partner. By mandate, we have to report to parliament every year through our annual report, and we've done it once. We hope to do it annually now. So welcome also if you want to make any comments or questions. We colleagues, excellencies from the embassies. We have 25 embassies here. We also want to acknowledge the former commissioners also participated. It's 21 years old, which means we have many sets of commissioners who have gone through the arduous task of making Suhakam what it is. So welcome. And of course, civil society. We have a good mix of representative from government agencies. So please feel free to make your thoughts and comments here. Anything so far? None. Any other? Okay, so I acknowledge all the congratulatory messages to all of us. It's very positive. I think our staff and commissioners are smiling today. We also want to thank the Foreign Minister for also issuing a statement this morning, congratulating us and encouraging us in a very positive, forward-looking statement. I think that gives us strength coming from the Minister and from the Foreign Ministry, taken in great appreciation on behalf of the government of Malaysia. So if I don't see any coming in here, there's a question about okay, so maybe there is a more targeted question about, because in the setup of the commission we have for many years it was general commissions. I use the word general meaning that we take up all human rights. But just starting 2 years ago, we had a new office of the Children's Commissioner. Now we have a dedicated Children's Commissioner, Professor Dato Azia, as you know. So there's a question also, what would be the implications of this re-accreditation in terms of the office of the Children's Commissioner and the mandate of the Children's Commissioner. I will open it up here if any panel members want to take it up, but I can also invite Prof. Azia if you have any thoughts on this. I will give you a few minutes, Prof. Azia, if you want to come in, but to the panel members, these are more specific for the Children's Commissioner, but the mandate of the Office of the Children's Commission falls within the mandate of the Suhakam Act. It derives the same powers and the same mandate of that Act. But thank you for that question from one person from Vanguards for Change. Yeah, and there's another question also that I would read out now. What role do you see business playing in elevating the standards of human rights in Malaysia? So this is another stakeholder which we never really touch, but I think Dr. Punita already mentioned that National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights. So the question is, what is the role do you see of business community playing in elevating the standards of human rights in Malaysia? Very, very powerful question. Business is very powerful in Malaysia. And also, okay, this one I think panel members, we have a free for all, because the question they're asking the panelists, but it says, what is the level of human rights among Malaysian parliamentarians and aduns. So I'm sure the MPs want to answer, but this one is like what we think and feel about MPs. So this is what do you call soalan cepu mas. You can say anything, but I know the MPs you can also write your comments on the chat box. We'll pick it up. But those are the 3 questions now before us for any feedback. But maybe I'll start with Dr. Punita. If you want to start us off, Dr. Punita, on that question on business. Yeah.
Mr. Gerard, thank you. I think in terms of business, as I mentioned earlier in my presentation, we are working on the action plan on business and human rights. And of course, the fundamentals of that action plan is the NBA, baseline assessment that we need to do. And the fundamentals, of course, is going back to the UNGP, where there are 3 principles of the UNGP, which is the state, the responsibility of the state, businesses, as well as access to remedy. So we can see here that businesses actually play a very important role, especially in terms of responsible business conduct. So I think that speaks that how whatever they do in terms of their business, they have to take into consideration human rights values and also uphold the principle of human rights. So I think the National Action Plan for Business and Human Rights will look at all this, and we're engaging with large scale businesses as well to ensure that all these areas, especially human rights violations, are taken into consideration, and we should look into it seriously in developing this action.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Dr.
Mr. Gerald?
Yes.
Moderator?
Yes, Dato' Ma.
If I may just say a few words following on
Dato'
what,
Ma, just a moment. I have a hand up first. I will give the hand.
Please, thank you.
Yeah, I will invite commissioners to add in something. I see a hand. I think that's Ambassador John, right?
Yes, Gerard.
Okay. Good to see you. Over to you, Ambassador.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Gerard. And a very good morning to you, as well as to my former boss and my present boss. So I've got to be very careful how I ask this question. You have mentioned just now that you need to deal with all issues related to human rights that come to the Commission, which basically means being friends to all and enemies to none. Among this entire plethora of human rights issues, does Suhakam concentrate on any particular issue? And if so, what are they? And because in certain countries, they, instead of picking on issues which they know they will not be able to, at the end of the day, be able to provide good answers, so they concentrate on certain topics. So does Suhakam have any such topics in mind? Thank you very much, Gerard.
Thank you. I think I see our chairman smiling, so I think your question was good, Ambassador John. You passed the question test. But good to see you from Europe. Okay, I think that question, maybe as commissioners who want to take the floor to also answer, you can. But I will give a round to our panelists. If any additions to our panelists here, Dato' Sri Sharul, you want to add anything at this point to the questions asked so far? Dato' Sri Sharul, do you want to add anything? I don't know whether you are able to hear me. Dato' Sri Sharul? Yeah. Do you want to add anything to just maybe a final comment on any of the questions made?
No, this is about, the role of business in terms of improving human rights. My approach is more like a layman's approach, or like common sense kind of approach. I do not want to touch on the action plan that, under the care of by you. I think it is natural that if the standard of living of people are low, are very poor, then the awareness about human rights, I would presume, is going to be very low too. So this is where I think the business entity has an important role to play, at least in terms of their contribution towards improving the status of, or rather the standard of living of the poor people. I think as the standard of living of population, increase gets better, and I think that will also contribute towards the improvement, the overall, human rights situation of that particular community. That is my general comments to that question.
Thank you, Datuk Sri. I hand over to Philip. Any final comments on picking up from the thoughts or questions? There's a question, maybe I'll ask you about members of parliament in Malaysia, since you're from Australia. Maybe what is the role and function of maybe parliament in human rights?
Sure, happy. Thanks, Commissioner Joseph. Happy to take that question. And I think just again to acknowledge that Suhakam's improved engagement with Parliament, particularly on its annual report now being debated, and this was something that was seen as a really positive step by the SCA at the most recent accreditation session. That strengthened engagement, particularly on the annual report and presenting on the human rights situation in Malaysia. That's certainly one of the key kind of aspects of a productive relationship between the NHRI and Parliament. In addition to the Paris Principles, there's a separate set of standards known as the Belgrade Principles, which specify a range of suggested guidance, essentially, for the relationship between NHRIs and parliaments. Some of that relates to the Parliament's role, obviously, in a mandate, an institution like Suhakam with a legislative mandate. Parliaments have control over the parameters of that mandate. So there is a key role for parliamentarians in defining the legal mandate of the NHRI. But I think one of the most practical aspects of the Belgrade Principles is that they prescribe suggest various mechanisms of cooperation between NHRIs and Parliament that go further than just the tabling of an annual report or that reporting relationship, but also cooperation, and particularly and I can't speak specifically to the Malaysian context, but where there are parliamentary committees that are tasked with supervising human rights compliance, developing a structured relationship with those committees, and also for the purpose of commenting on prospective legislation, and having that structured cooperation is really important. That's certainly from the perspective of the international standards, and again, something we would certainly encourage from the APF.
Thank you, Philip. So for members of parliament here, I think we've got work to continue from Paris to Belgrade now. There's another set of principles. But I think your role is crucially important, and it's a good point. It's just not that we want to bring the annual report to you, but we want to sit down and go through, because you are policy makers, and that's our role, to advise government on policy and law. So thank you for making that point. Shamira, your final thoughts before we close the session?
Thank you so much, Commissioner Joseph. And just adding on to the points that have already been made, especially about the Belgrade Principles and the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, I think one of our concerns, which we've also raised at other forum with you, would be to have, wherever possible, wherever applicable, to heed calls from civil society on much needed reviews and revisions related to business and human rights policies, and constantly try to highlight to the Parliament as well the case of human rights defenders who are working on business and human rights violations, especially when it comes to transnational businesses as well. I think we've previously also identified that there's a lot that Suhakam as an NHRI can do to raise these issues in terms of policies, but keeping in mind the HRD protection aspect constant throughout. A constant review of the policies would be very, very important to ensure that these policies they protect people, but they're also ethical and just at the heart of it. So those would be my final comments. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we will now invite. I saw Datuk Ma Weng Kwai, our commissioner, who wanted to add something. Datuk Ma, over to you.
Thank you, Commissioner Gerald. A very good afternoon to Chairman Tan Sri and colleagues and all participants in this very interesting session. I just want to add on to what Dr. Punita has mentioned about business and human rights. and the observations made by Datuk Sri from MOFA. I think the work on business and human rights is fast gaining importance and traction in the community, because I think people are now beginning to realize that when they talk about human rights, it's not just about individual persons' human rights, but it also affects and concern corporations as well. So as under the United Nations guiding principles, as we may know, there are the three pillars to consider: protect, respect, and remedy. So the work that we have been doing in Suhakam is more of the managerial level, so to speak, so that we can interact with the corporations. In particular, just to name a few, will be like Petronas, Top Glove, and some other very big companies, where they have approached us to ask us to have sessions for their top management to talk about business and human rights. And for our program, we have been talking about forced labor, rights and liabilities and obligations of workers, not just individual and local workers, but more importantly, migrant workers, the undocumented workers. So the range is very wide. And when we talk about forced labor, of course, it's not just, we're not talking about slavery as in the usual sense of the word, but we talk about the conditions and the terms of employment and so on. So it also enlarged, the issue is also enlarged to include climate change, environmental issues, water pollution, and plastic waste, and so on, because these are all the different facets of commerce and business that people have been doing. And in the process, it affects human rights of every ordinary person in the country. So this is just a bit of work that's being done. And I really want to thank Dr. Punita from Bayu for having this business and human rights national action plan. We have a steering committee working on this. And I think I'm feeling very positive that something good will come out of this series of interactions. Just to conclude, if I may just say, on an important day like today, I think it's very important not what we are saying about ourselves, but more importantly, to hear what others have to say about us. And what I hear today is quite encouraging, it's quite positive. So therefore, we shall soldier on. Thank you very much, Mr. Gerald.
Thank you, Commissioner Ma Wing Kwai. We're about to come to the end. I see Dr. Punita. Dr. Punita, can we hold a second? I'll just take one final question. I see Wan Kasim, and then you can take the floor. Wan Kasim, I see your hand up. I'm hoping this is the same Wan Kasim Suhakam knows.
Hi, Mr. Gerald. Yes, Wan Kasim here. I am a former staff of Suhakam and currently with FGV. I would like to join others in congratulating Suhakam on being re-accredited as an A status at HRI by the SCA. As discussed during the session today, the SCA or the accreditation process does not only look at the performance of an NHRI, but it also looks at the mandate and how the NHRI is established. And this could be beyond the control of the NHRI itself, meaning that the status or evaluation of the SCA on an NHRI does not solely hinge on the performance, but also on government intervention or political will to ensure that the NHRI has the necessary powers and is independent and effective to discharge its mandate. And I've looked at the SCA report, and I have no doubt in my mind, at least in my view, that the SCA made a correct decision to accredit Suhakam as an A status NHRI. However, some do argue that a recommendation by the SCA to downgrade an NHRI, to downgrade the status of an NHRI, or even to decide to downgrade the status of an NHRI, could be useful actually to the NHRI to serve as a motivation to the powers that be to carry out or to implement the recommendations by the SCA. If you look at the recommendations by the SCA, they have been quite, these recommendations are not new. I've seen these recommendations by the SEA in the past, at least 2 re-accreditation exercises on Suhakam, which means that these recommendations have not been adequately acted on. So I just wanted to, get the thoughts from the panelists as to whether, a recommendation by the SEA to downgrade the status of an NHRI would actually be something that's that's beneficial to the NHRI and perhaps to the the overall human rights agenda within the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Wan Kasim, for asking a question from your experience in Suhakam also. Thank you very much. Over to you. We're coming to the end of the session. Over to you, Dr. Punita.
Thanks, Mr. Gerard. I just wanted to inform everyone that besides, we were talking about business and human rights just now, and we'll be organizing our first national conference on business and human rights from the 21st to 22nd of September this month. So, of course, we're doing it with Suhakam and UNDP. So I would just like to announce it, and we hope this is an invitation to everyone. So we'll be, sending out the invite soon.
Okay, thank you for that announcement already. So take note of the dates. More info is coming your way. Just on that provocative question by Wan Kasim, whether a downgrade is actually a good thing to push up standards. Any quick feedback from Shamira or Philip? Go ahead, Philip or Shamira. Yeah, Shamira, go ahead, Shamira.
Thank you. I think that's a very valid question, and this is something that we have seen in the work that we do in different countries, where some of them also happen to be B status NHRIs. I think for us, it gives us a point of advocacy to keep working, but also not take it very easy when we have an A status NHRI. I think the work is very important, even when the NHRI has an A status. Perhaps downgrading it to a B status might be something that doesn't happen very often, or it happens in the most severe of circumstances when there are very, very important issues. But that being said, I think as civil society, we keep working on the recommendations no matter what. We've also noticed that the recommendations have been repeated since the last accreditation cycle as well. And this is something that we will keep working on. It's not right now whether this, the NHRI was an A status or a B status. That's the work that we see as civil society to keep upholding that. But if it was something very, very of a very serious nature, and this is something that perhaps Suhakam can address as well, if constantly over the years, it may be unable to deal with some of those recommendations, then that would be a question that perhaps we could answer better at that point. So this would be our position on this, but I'm also happy to hear Philip's thoughts on that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Philip, with a quick short intervention, please.
Sure. Yeah, look, just it's one of the issues, and we, when we represent our members and advise them on accreditation, a lot of our membership feels it's quite unfair that they are being, their performance is essentially being assessed on the basis of things that are outside of their control, but which is the actions of government and parliament in the control of the legal mandate. However, what that says is that NHRIs really have a responsibility to advocate for change to their enabling law, advocate publicly and transparently. And I think that while I appreciate that there is some consistency between the previous and most recent recommendations directed to Suhakam in terms of its legal mandate, there is an acknowledgement by the subcommittee of the efforts taken by the institution and to advocate and work collaboratively with its counterparts in government on promoting some of those amendments. And I think it's that point that was highlighted by the subcommittee in this instance. And but I do think within the next 5-year period, I really think that there will need to be some significant change for going when Suhakam goes back to the SCA for its reaccreditation again. Yeah.
Thank you. Friends, I know this is the discussion is getting exciting now. I think there's some questions for more information. Dr. Punita, you need to share some information with Ambassador John. I think Ambassador will make sure you get it. The question also, there is a suggestion on maybe time for more basic human rights issue on television. And this is where I'm going to answer Ambassador John's original question. I think the annual report is also shared in the chat box. What happens is that we have a 5-year game plan, and you're right, Ambassador. Of course, we have to respond to all, but we also try to be a bit more strategic and have some issues we pick up in a more systematic fashion. I think Commissioner Ma already mentioned climate change, business, and human rights. So some things you can see is on the agenda item, and this is done through our annual planning that we have at the end of the year, and that guides our work. So every division here will have some planned work on either on training, on policy brief paper, on complaints, on visiting prisons. So those things are work that we have to do. But also the other real challenge and difficulty, Ambassador John, is Human Rights Commission needs to be responsive to what that keeps coming up. So suddenly it's about election, and then a whole team goes for monitoring. Suddenly it's about death in custody, and a team goes. So it's responsive, and it's not the best manner to have systematic work, but the organization definitely needs more resources to move forward. But we take your point that the only way to work is to work in a systematic fashion, and that's what we hope to do. And as you can see, the 2 documents, a strategic plan for 5-year gives you a hint. Plus, the annual report is our way of telling how we worked. You can see departments, divisions there. We also have a human rights education module, working with the Ministry of Education, already printed and hoping to roll them out. So you go on every end, officers have done a lot of work on that end. So maybe that's a little bit, not maybe the best answer in detail, but we will do that. And I think instead of patriotic songs, well, we can have both patriotic songs and human rights education on TV. I think what he's trying to say is we don't have human rights education messaging on TV. That's a good point, yeah. So there's also a suggestion for, I think there's discussion in Parliament about APPGM on human rights or Select Committee on Human Rights. So please, friends, look at the discussion in the chat box. Very good stuff being written. We take that on board, and we thank you for your comments. The earlier question to our Children's Commissioner, Dato' Azia has just indicated that the Office of the Children's Commission is a new creation, and it's within the present Human Rights Commission. So it is growing, it is work in progress, and so I think this accreditation will also push the work and functioning of the Office of the Children's Commission, because this office sort of has the policy division, it has the education part, it has the complaints part, all within one office, but focused on children's issue. And also being in the commission, it's about sitting in the office like today. Colleagues are here, commissioners are here, but also about going out. I think it was mentioned about the grassroots. I think just the last 2 weeks, myself and some officers, we were visiting prison, 2 prisons, institution for mental health and also we visited 6 indigenous villages because of the issue of vaccination now. The government is ready to roll out enough vaccination, keep going to the village, but there is a fear by the community to accept vaccination. So Suhakam is also trying to use our good officers to encourage them, to explain to them on this. So the demand is wide and far, and we hope to be able to respond. But definitely, Dr. Sri Sharul, Dr. Punita, and I think colleagues here, we definitely need a bigger staff team, both in the Sabah, Sarawak and HQ office, for us to roll out the office. And you know what this means, because I know Dr. Punita also works with a small team. I see her smiling, so I understand that smile. So that we also need more team members there. But with that, I think I can bring to a close this very good discussion on realizing Target 16A of the Sustainable Development Goals through the re-accreditation process. A huge thank you to our excellent panel members, Dato' Sri Muhammad Sharul, the Secretary General of MOFA Malaysia, Mr. Philip Waddell from APF, Legal and Policy Manager, Dr. Punita, Director for Policy Research, VAYU, and Ms. Shomira Sanyal from Forum Asia ANI Network. A big thank you. We can't give you a physical thank you, but those who know how to use reaction, please use the reaction chat box and put some nice reactions for our panel members. With that, a big thank you, and I hand it over to the MC. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Mr. Gerald, for that robust discussion. We will now move forward for the next item, the video presentations. Over the past 22 years, Suhakam has grown so much, and we aspire to continue strengthening our effectiveness as an NHRI. For many of us here, the commissioners and the staff members, our personal values and Suhakam visions are parallel. Those working for Suhakam, those working with Suhakam, we take it more than just merely a job, but being part of the change that we want to see in Malaysia. It's our personal conviction to uphold human rights within our capacity. It's not an exaggeration to say that Suhakam is close to our hearts. On that note, let's hear the chairperson, commissioners, and the staff members sharing their wishes for Suhakam's 22nd anniversary.
Maintaining the A status is important for Suhakam. It means that Suhakam is a credible and independent NHRI. At the international level, it grants Suhakam with significant participation rights, especially in the human rights councils as well as the UN treaty bodies. At the same time, there's opportunities for Suhakam to be involved in the work of Gandri. At the national level, being reaccredited with the A status for the third time is a recognition of Suhakam's standings and track records as a national human rights institutions. It has been able to carry out its statutory mandates and functions as provided by the Human Rights Commissions of Malaysia Act 1999. We at Suhakam will give serious considerations to all the recommendations made by the SCA and take steps to address them. We will work with the governments, civil societies, human rights defenders, NGOs, and other stakeholders in this exercise. At the same time, we'll continue with our primary focus to carry out our work as provided by the National Human Rights Commission Act 1999.
A success or failure of any part of a country, an institution like Suhakam in Malaysia, cannot be the sole responsibility of the human rights institution. So the role of government in ensuring that the Paris principles that make a Human Rights Commission good must be happening. Suhakam needs to be having all its powers in our act realized by agencies. Government must also start taking our advice much more systematically and seriously, because our mandate is to advise government on policy and law in line with human rights standards, both internationally and our federal constitution. We also believe the role of other stakeholders, the people who have human rights as the starting point of their life, they must demand an effective and independent Human Rights Commission of Suhakam. And that's why we thank civil society for ever being critical with us, for ever being our partners as human rights defenders, and that's, I think, a test of whether Suhakam is effective or not, if their openness to discuss with the most critical voices in the country.
Why it matters to ensure NHRI or Suhakam comply with the Paris Principle to set the minimum requirements of what an NHRI should be and its effectiveness. To ensure NHRI or Suhakam able to act independently without any influence or intervention. NHRI able to fulfill their mandates as a human rights institution, especially matters related to freedom of speech or expressions, democracy, no torture, and inhuman act. NHRI should be qualified as an essential service in time of crisis.
This is very important because it gives due recognition to Suhakam as a viable, independent, competent human rights institute. The idea, of course, is that to maintain this status, because being on category A of the SCA, this means that we are held to be in due compliance with the Paris Principles. This is a very important set of principles because it deals with the way human rights issues are investigated, complaints are resolved, matters are mediated, to arrive at solutions which are helpful in the process to show that we are independent, our steps taken are effective, and hopefully this will form the basis of a mandate of advice and consultation with the government.
Target 16A of the SDGs denote the obligation to strengthen relevant national institutions, including through international cooperation, for building capacity at all levels, in particular in developing countries, to prevent violence and combat terrorism and crime. In fact, the 2030 Agenda overall strives to leave no one behind, envisaging a world of universal respect for equality and non-discrimination between and within countries, including gender equality, by reaffirming the responsibilities of states to respect, protect, and promote human rights without distinction of any kind as to race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinions, national and social origin, property, birth, disability, or other status.
Selamat menyambut ulang tahun Suhakam
Selamat
yang
menyambut ulang tahun ke-22
Happy Suhakam Day.
Happy Suhakam Day.
Thank you, Chairperson, Commissioners, and fellow colleagues for your very important reflections. I said it before, but I think I need to say it again. Suhakam is indeed very close to our hearts, and happy Suhakam Day. Just a second reminder that all the materials that have been used for the day, the PowerPoint slides, some of the speeches, the video presentations will be shared towards the end of the session to all participants, will be made available. Yeah. Moving on to the next item, one of Suhakam's statutory function is to promote human rights awareness and provide human rights education across the spectrum of society in Malaysia. Suhakam takes serious effort to use various means and creative approaches to ensure this mandate is fulfilled. The Promotion and Outreach Division has recently taken a new approach by advertising the human rights posters and messengers on human rights thematic issues in the public trains. The posters were featured on the wall and the window panels, doors, and back seats. To further bolster the spread of the human rights messages, Suhakam launched an online contest with the theme Rights for Right, where the members of the public need to post a selfie of them with a human rights poster and a self-written human rights caption in Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. I thought that was really creative and reached out to various parts of Malaysian traveling in the trains, particularly in Kuala Lumpur. In another instance, we have the Education and Training Division team through the Ministry of Human Rights works very closely with selected schools throughout Malaysia. There are currently 469 primary and secondary schools who have boarded the Human Rights Best Practices School program. And recently, Suhakam organized an online oratory competition for the students. We are very thrilled to share the snippets of the submission and to announce the winners. Let's watch a video on the Rights for Rights contest and the oratory competition.
aspirasi rukun negara ialah mencapai perpaduan yang lebih erat dalam kalangan masyarakat. Bahasa dan pendidikan dapat digunakan sebagai alat untuk meningkatkan kesefahaman. Malaysia prihatin membawa masa yang cukup mendalam kepada seluruh rakyat Malaysia.
Perpaduan kaum juga memainkan peranan dalam meningkatkan lagi taraf ekonomi negara.
Rukun negara ialah falsafah negara Malaysia yang mendukung 5 prinsip penting. Penghayatan rukun negara telah dimantapkan dalam semua peringkat pendidikan negara.
Bahasa Melayu merupakan bahasa kebangsaan yang termaktub dalam Perlembagaan Malaysia.
Perpaduan merupakan satu proses yang menyatupadukan anggota masyarakat dan negara.
Rukun negara dijadikan ideologi merentas biologi dan nilai sebagai titik persamaan.
Maka amalan terbaik hak asasi manusia AHTAM kita perkenalkan sejak di bangku sekolah.
Semangat Malaysia Prihatin telah memberikan kemakmuran kepada rakyat Malaysia.
Keamanan dan keharmonian yang terhasil daripada kesatuan rakyat ini dapat dikekalkan.
Malaysia telah meratifikasi Convention mengenai hak kanak-kanak atau Convention on the Rights of the Child.
Jika dilihat perkara 19 dalam pengisytiharan hak asasi manusia sejagat UDHR 1948,
IMUP atau lebih dikenali sebagai Rancangan Integrasi Murid untuk Perpaduan merupakan satu program yang dibangunkan untuk memupuk interaksi sosial.
Peranan kerajaan di bawah Seksyen 233 Akta Komunikasi dan Multimedia 1998.
Hak kebebasan bersuara diiktiraf sebagai hak asasi manusia di dalam Perkara 19 Perisytiharan Hak Asasi Manusia Sejagat.
Please join me in congratulating all the winners. It was truly heartwarming, especially to see the younger generation speaking about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and other international human rights treaties. I believe many of you will resonate with the reflection that we could imagine a future where Malaysians devotedly uphold human rights, values, and principles. That was indeed a perfect segue to move on to the final session of the day. Last but not least, we are pleased to have the Vice Chairperson of Suhakam, Associate Professor Dr. Nick Salidasu, to deliver the closing remarks. Over to you, Professor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kumarin, our Chairperson. Yang berbahagia Datuk Seri Muhammad Syahrul Ikram Yaakob, Secretary General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Murad Erraghib, Chairperson of the Subcommittee on Accreditation, distinguished speakers, members of Parliament, Tan Sri, Datuk Sri, Datuk, Datin Datin, professors, excellencies, commissioners, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum and good afternoon. We have now come to the end of the 2021 Suhakam Day celebration. Apart from commemorating the 22 years of the establishment of Human Rights Commission of Malaysia, Suhakam, today's virtual forum on realizing Target 16A of the Sustainable Development Goals through the re-accreditation process has successfully met its primary objectives, which include, among others, to share the outcome of Suhakam's 2021 re-accreditation by the Subcommittee on Accreditation, and to discuss and identify steps forward in support of strengthening Suhakam's effectiveness and credibility in line with the requirements of the Paris Principles. Therefore, on behalf of Suhakam, I wish to thank you for being part of our celebration and for providing your constructive views and recommendations. I wish to reiterate that the A status in HRI signifies independence, transparency, credibility, legitimacy, impartiality, and accountability, among others. Furthermore, the establishment and strengthening of NHRIs pursuant to the Paris Principles falls within the set of international commitments and obligations made by states. In other words, a state having an NHRI accredited with A status also signifies the government's commitment and effort to comply with these international human rights obligations. Ladies and gentlemen, as we heard from our distinguished panel of speakers today, the responsibility of maintaining A status does not solely lie with Suhakam. With Malaysia's candidature to the United Nations Human Rights Council for the term 2022 to 2024, Suhakam hopes that the government will fulfill its commitment to continue to support the strengthening of Suhakam as an A status Paris Principle and HRI, among others, through improved funding support, ongoing law review toward strengthening its governing act, and institutionalizing more government agency engagement with Suhakam and commitment to continue to engage constructively with all member states and stakeholders towards the full realization of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. It is worth underlining that Suhakam currently consists of 9 commissioners, 3 officers, and less than 90 staff members. With that being said, Suhakam has limited resources and can only continue to strengthen its effectiveness and work towards its full compliance with the Paris Principles, both in law and in practice, through the support and mobilization of all our partners and stakeholders, while keeping our independence in doing so. We acknowledge that in reality, no NHRI operates in perfect compliance with the Paris Principles and that there is always room for improvement. As such, Suhakam would like to call on all our partners and stakeholders to work closely with us to collectively pursue and effect changes needed based on SCA recommendations in preparation for the next re-accreditation without delay, given that it is an ongoing process and the expectations on NHRIs increase by cycle. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you all for your time and important contributions today. I would also like to take this opportunity to wish that all of us will remain safe and in good health during this challenging and difficult time. With that, again, I thank you, and over to you, Kumaran.
Thank you, Dr. Nick. We appreciate you for taking the time to deliver the closing remark. Once again, we thank everyone for your participation and contribution to make the Suhakam Day 2021 observation truly memorable and meaningful. Please follow us on our social media platforms, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, to be updated of our future activities and events. On a lighter note, though the Suhakam office may be physically momentarily shut due to the National Recovery Plan, all our virtual communication doors and channels remain open for everyone. Please feel free to reach out to us. You are most welcome to forward your complaints or any concerns for Suhakam's attention and further action. Suhakam will continue to uphold the universality of human rights values and live up to its slogan, human rights for all. Thank you. I think we all can now unmute ourselves and cheer up a bit. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Very much.
Bye-bye.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Kamaran. Thank you, Gerald. Thank you, Tan Sri, Rafida, everyone in Suhakam, and all our participants.
Thank you to the
Thank
Good
you.
one.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Dato' Ma,
Thank
Tolong.
you, Dato'.
Gerald, that was a good one.
Thank you, thank you.
Thanks, Gerald.
Gerald.
Bye.
Rafida, thank you, Rafida. Mana Dato'? Dato'.
Thanks,
Where
Dr.
is Dato'?
Punita. I see.
Dr. Ponita, where is she? Dr. Chia.
Good to hear your voice, Wan Kasim. Lama tak dengar suara.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Congratulations again to Suhakam.
Good
To our
question.
to our
Wan Kasim.
translator and sign language
Yeah.
interpreters, a big hand to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Go.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Tahniah kemarin.
Thank you.
Terima kasih Puan Rafidah, terima kasih semua.